There was a time when watching a movie wasn't instant. If you wanted to watch something new, you had to leave your house, drive to a video rental store, walk through rows of movies, and choose something you hoped would be worth watching. But there was one problem. If you didn't return the movie on time, you paid a late fee, and sometimes that late fee could cost almost as much as the movie itself. Then a small company appeared, and it had a completely different idea. Instead of making people drive to a store, what if the movies came to them? That company was Netflix. Today, streaming Netflix feels almost normal. You open an app, search for a movie, choose a show, and within seconds, you're watching. But that simple experience completely changed the entertainment industry. Netflix helped transform movies and television from something controlled by schedules and physical stores into something available on demand. It changed not only where we watched, but how we watched. Before Netflix, television networks decided when you watched a show. Movie studios decided when you could watch a movie at home. Video stores decided what was available on their shelves. Netflix challenged all of them, and then it went even further. Instead of simply giving people access to movies, Netflix began studying what people watched, what they searched for, what they finished, what they stopped watching, and what they watched again. That information became incredibly valuable, because Netflix wasn't just learning what people liked, it was learning what people were likely to watch next. Then came another revolutionary idea. Why release one episode every week, when you could release an entire season at once? That created a new behavior, binge-watching. People stopped waiting for television, they started watching on their own schedule. And eventually, Netflix stopped depending on Hollywood studios for content. It began producing its own, shows that could become global hits, without following the traditional rules of television. But here's the most interesting part. Netflix didn't become powerful because it invented streaming. It became powerful because it kept changing its business. Before the old version became obsolete, from DVDs, to subscriptions, to streaming, to original content, to a global entertainment platform, Netflix didn't simply adapt to the future, it helped create the future. But none of this seemed inevitable when Netflix first started, because in the beginning, it was just a company trying to solve one very ordinary problem, a late fee, and that is where the Netflix story really begins. In the late 1990s, the video rental business was dominated by physical stores. If you wanted to watch a movie, you went to the store, you searched through the shelves, picked a VHS tape, paid for it, and took it home. It was simple, but there was a problem: late fees if you forgot to return your movie. The bill kept growing, and one story would become part of Netflix's origin legend. Reed Hastings had rented a movie and returned it late. The fee was around $40. Whether that exact experience was the single moment that created Netflix is debated. But Hastings and co-founder Mark Randolph were clearly looking at a bigger problem. The traditional video rental experience was inconvenient, so they asked a completely different question. What if customers didn't have to visit a store at all? What if they could order movies from home? And what if they didn't have to worry about late fees? In 1997, Hastings and Randolph founded Netflix. But Netflix wasn't originally the streaming company we know today. There was no Netflix app, no massive library of shows, and no streaming platform. Instead, Netflix began with something much simpler. The idea was straightforward. Customers could browse movies online, choose what they wanted, and receive the DVD through the mail. When they finished watching, they could send it back. Then another movie would arrive. It was a completely different experience from visiting a rental store. You didn't have to drive anywhere. You didn't have to search through physical shelves. And most importantly, Netflix eventually removed the traditional late fee model. That small change was incredibly important, because Netflix wasn't just selling movies, it was removing friction. And removing friction is one of the most powerful ideas in business. If something is difficult, people do it less. If something is convenient, people do it more. Netflix made movie rental more convenient. But the company still had a huge problem. Customers were used to physical stores, and one company dominated that world: Blockbuster. Blockbuster had thousands of locations, massive brand recognition, and millions of customers. Compared with that giant, Netflix was tiny. But Netflix had something Blockbuster didn't fully appreciate at first. It wasn't trying to build a better video store. It was building a completely different system. A system based on the internet, subscriptions, personalization, and eventually, streaming. But before Netflix could change entertainment, it had to convince people to change their habits. And that wouldn't be easy, because Blockbuster wasn't just a competitor, it was the symbol of how people watched movies, and Netflix was about to challenge the entire model. In the late 1990s, if you wanted to rent a movie, there was one name that dominated the industry: Blockbuster. Its blue and yellow stores were everywhere. Customers could walk in, browse thousands of movies, pick one, and take it home immediately. Netflix couldn't compete with that experience. It didn't have thousands of stores, it didn't have a massive physical presence, and it couldn't give customers a movie instantly. Instead, Netflix offered something completely different: convenience. You could browse movies online, create a list, and have DVDs delivered directly to your home. But Netflix had another advantage: its subscription model. Instead of paying for every individual rental, customers could pay a recurring monthly fee. That changed the psychology of renting. You weren't constantly thinking, should I pay for another movie? You had already subscribed. So the question became, what do I want to watch next? That was a major shift. But Blockbuster wasn't standing still. It had enormous scale. Thousands of stores, millions of customers, and a business model that had worked for years. The company eventually launched its own online rental service, but Netflix had already started building something more powerful. It was collecting information. Every time customers added a movie, every time they rated something, every time they returned a DVD, Netflix learned more about their preferences, and that data could help Netflix decide what movies to recommend. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Netflix wasn't simply renting movies, it was building a relationship with the customer. The company knew what you watched, it knew what you liked, and over time, it could make your next choice easier. Blockbuster had something Netflix desperately wanted: physical presence. But Netflix had something Blockbuster couldn't easily recreate: a digital relationship with the customer. And then, Netflix made an offer to Blockbuster. In the early 2000s, Netflix reportedly approached Blockbuster about a potential acquisition. The opportunity was there, but the deal never happened. Blockbuster continued operating its traditional stores, while Netflix continued building its online model, and this became one of the most famous examples in business history. A company that looked small was developing the model of the future, while the industry leader was protecting the model of the past. But Netflix still wasn't a streaming company, it was shipping DVDs through the mail. So the next challenge was obvious. How could Netflix eliminate the DVD completely? The answer would change entertainment forever: streaming. Netflix had solved one problem: people no longer needed to drive to a video store. They could order movies from home, but Netflix still had a bigger challenge. How could it make people stay? The answer was subscriptions. Instead of charging customers every time they rented a movie, Netflix created a recurring monthly relationship. Pay once and keep watching. That sounds simple today, but at the time, it was a major change in the way people thought about entertainment. Traditional video rental was based on transactions. You wanted a movie? You paid for that movie. You returned it. Then you paid again for the next one. Netflix changed that relationship. The customer wasn't simply buying a rental, they were buying access. And that distinction was incredibly powerful, because once someone subscribed, they had a reason to keep using Netflix. Every month, the customer paid, and every month, Netflix had another opportunity to keep them satisfied. This created what businesses call recurring revenue. For Netflix, that meant more predictable income. For customers, it meant less friction. There was no need to constantly think about individual rental prices. You could simply choose another movie, and another, and another. But Netflix's subscription model had another hidden advantage. It changed customer behavior. Imagine paying for a single movie. You might think carefully before choosing. Is this movie worth paying for? But if you've already paid your monthly subscription, that decision becomes easier. You start thinking, what should I watch tonight? The psychological barrier becomes smaller. And the more you use the service, the more valuable the subscription feels. This creates a powerful cycle. Netflix gives you access. You watch more. The service becomes part of your routine, and canceling becomes harder. Not because Netflix is forcing you to stay, but because you've built a habit. And habits are extremely valuable in business. But Netflix wasn't satisfied with simply renting DVDs. It was building something much bigger: a direct relationship with millions of customers. Netflix knew what people were watching. It knew which movies were popular. It knew what customers were searching for. And eventually, it could use all of that information to personalize the experience. That would become one of Netflix's greatest weapons. But first, Technology had to catch up. Internet speeds were improving. Broadband connections were becoming more common, and video streaming was becoming increasingly realistic. Netflix could see where the future was heading. The DVD business had made Netflix successful, but the company understood something important. The future wasn't physical, it was digital. In 2007, Netflix introduced streaming. At first, it was simply another feature alongside the DVD service. But it represented a fundamental change. For the first time, customers could watch movies and television shows without waiting for a DVD to arrive. No envelope, no delivery, no return, just play. And that single button would eventually transform the entire entertainment industry. When Netflix introduced streaming in 2007, it didn't immediately look like the future. At first, streaming was simply another feature. Customers could still receive DVDs by mail, but now, they could also watch selected movies and shows online. No waiting for the mail, no opening an envelope, no inserting a disc, just click and watch. It sounds normal today, but at the time, it was a major change, because Netflix was slowly removing the physical object from entertainment. The DVD was disappearing. The internet was becoming the delivery system, and that changed everything. Think about the traditional movie experience. A studio created a movie. The movie went to theaters. Later, it became available on DVD. Then, eventually, it might appear on television. Entertainment moved through a series of stages. Each stage had its own business, its own schedule, and its own limitations. Streaming began breaking down those barriers. A movie no longer needed to physically travel. To reach the customer, the data could travel instead, and once the internet became fast enough, entertainment could become almost instant. This created a completely new expectation. People no longer wanted to ask, "When is this movie available?" They started asking, "Is it available on Netflix?" That was a huge shift. Netflix was becoming more than a rental company. It was becoming a destination. A place people went specifically to find something to watch. And the timing was perfect. Broadband internet was expanding. Computers were becoming more powerful. Smartphones were emerging. Connected televisions were becoming popular. And eventually, Netflix could follow people across devices. You could watch on your computer, then your television, then your phone, and eventually, almost anywhere. Entertainment was becoming portable. But Netflix's biggest advantage wasn't simply technology, it was convenience. Imagine two options. Option 1, drive to a store, find a movie, rent it, drive home, watch it, return it. Option 2, sit on your sofa. Open Netflix, choose something, press play. The difference is enormous, and once customers experienced that convenience, going back became difficult. This is one of the most important lessons in business. When a company makes something dramatically easier, customers don't simply appreciate it, they start expecting it. And Netflix was creating a new expectation for entertainment. Instant access, on-demand viewing. No physical media, no fixed schedule, no need to leave home. But Netflix soon discovered something else. If it controlled the platform, it needed to understand what people wanted to watch. There were thousands of movies and shows. Too many choices could become a problem. Customers could open Netflix, see hundreds of options, and still have no idea what to watch. So Netflix began using something extremely powerful. Data. Every click, every search, every viewing decision could teach the company something, and that data would become the foundation of one of Netflix's greatest weapons, the recommendation algorithm, because Netflix wasn't just trying to answer, "What is popular?" It wanted to answer something much more valuable. What will you watch? Imagine opening Netflix and seeing hundreds, maybe thousands, of movies and shows. You could spend 20 minutes scrolling and still not know what to watch. This is a problem because having too much choice can sometimes be worse than having too little. Netflix understood this very early, so instead of simply giving everyone the same homepage, it started asking a different question. What does this particular person want to watch? And the answer came from data. Every time you watched something, Netflix learned. Every time you stopped watching, Netflix learned. Every time you searched, rated, skipped, or returned to a show, Netflix could use that information to understand your preferences. It wasn't just collecting data for curiosity. It was using data to make a prediction. What are you most likely to watch next? This became one of Netflix's most important competitive advantages. Imagine two people opening Netflix. One loves crime documentaries, the other loves romantic comedies. Why should they see the exact same homepage? Netflix didn't think they should, so the experience became increasingly personalized. The platform could highlight different genres, different movies, different shows, and even different recommendations for different users. But Netflix's data strategy went deeper. It could discover patterns that humans might miss. Maybe people who enjoyed one particular crime series also tended to watch a certain type of thriller. Maybe viewers who liked one actor were more likely to watch another movie featuring that actor. Maybe people who watched a show late at night preferred shorter episodes. Millions of viewing decisions could reveal patterns, and those patterns could help Netflix make better recommendations. But there was a bigger opportunity. Netflix could use its data, not only to recommend content, but to decide what content to create. And that was a game changer. Traditional television networks had executives, producers, focus groups, ratings, and years of experience. Netflix had something different. It had millions of viewing behaviors. It could see what audiences actually watched, not simply what they claimed they liked. And that gave Netflix confidence to take risks. One of the biggest examples was House of Cards. Netflix wasn't just buying a show. It was making a major bet on original content. And the company had data suggesting that its audience was interested in political dramas. The original British series, and actor Kevin Spacey. Netflix could connect those signals. Then, it made the investment. The result was a major turning point. Netflix was no longer simply distributing entertainment created by other companies. It was becoming a content creator, and that changed the company's power. Because if Netflix controlled the platform and produced the content, it controlled more of the relationship with the audience. But there was another unexpected consequence. Netflix's recommendations made it easier for people to discover something new. A show that might never have attracted attention on traditional television could suddenly become popular because Netflix recommended it to the right audience. This changed how entertainment could spread, and it created a new question for Hollywood. If Netflix knows what people want and controls the platform where they watch it, who really controls the future of entertainment? The answer was becoming clearer. Netflix wasn't just a streaming service anymore. It was becoming a studio. And its next move would change television forever. Netflix had already changed the way people watched entertainment. But there was still one problem. Netflix didn't own most of the content people were watching. The movies belonged to studios. The television shows belonged to networks. Netflix was essentially renting access to someone else's library, and that created a dangerous dependency. If a major studio decided not to renew a licensing agreement, Netflix could lose some of its most popular content. So Netflix made a bold decision. It would create its own. This was a completely different business. Netflix was no longer simply a distributor. It was becoming a studio, and one of its biggest early bets was House of Cards. The company reportedly committed around $100 million to produce 2 seasons. That was an enormous gamble. But Netflix had something traditional television networks didn't have in the same way. It had viewing data. Netflix knew what millions of people were watching. It knew which genres performed well. It knew which actors attracted audiences. And it knew that people who enjoyed certain types of content were likely to watch more of it. So instead of relying entirely on intuition, Netflix could combine creative decisions with audience data. Then came another major breakthrough. Original programming became a reason to subscribe. Think about it. If Netflix only offered movies that customers could watch somewhere else, why stay subscribed? But if Netflix had shows you couldn't get anywhere else, Netflix became harder to replace. That changed the economics of the business. Netflix wasn't simply paying for content anymore. It was investing in exclusive content. And the strategy worked. Shows such as House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Stranger Things, The Crown, and many others helped establish Netflix as a serious entertainment brand. The company was no longer competing only with video stores. It was competing with television networks, movie studios, and eventually, almost every major entertainment company. But Netflix did something else differently. Traditional television was built around schedules. Monday night, Tuesday night, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. You had to be there when the show aired. Netflix didn't care about that model. It could release an entire season and let the audience decide when to watch. That sounds obvious now, but it changed the relationship between creators and viewers. A television show was no longer something you had to fit into your schedule. Your schedule could revolve around the show, and that created a new behavior. Binge-watching one episode then another, then another. Suddenly, 5 hours had passed. Netflix wasn't simply producing content. It was changing the way audiences consumed it, and there was another advantage. Netflix could produce content for different audiences, in different countries, without needing every show to become a traditional Hollywood blockbuster, a Korean drama, a Spanish thriller, a German crime series, a British drama could travel across borders. Subtitles and dubbing made international content accessible to millions. This gave Netflix something incredibly powerful, global scale. The company could create a show in one country and potentially turn it into a worldwide hit. Entertainment was becoming global, and Netflix was becoming one of the companies driving that change. But success created a new problem. If Netflix could disrupt traditional television, other companies could eventually fight back, and they were coming. Disney, Amazon, HBO, Apple, and countless other competitors were beginning to understand the opportunity. The streaming wars were about to begin. Before Netflix, television had a rhythm, one episode every week. You watched it when the network told you to watch it. Miss the episode, you might have to wait for a repeat. Then Netflix changed the rules. Instead of making viewers wait, Netflix started giving them control when an entire season became available. The decision was no longer, will I watch this week's episode? It became, how much do I want to watch tonight? And that created something that would become a normal part of modern entertainment. Binge-watching, one episode finishes, and another begins. The viewer doesn't have to make another decision. The next episode is already there, just a few seconds away. This sounds like a small feature, but it completely changed the relationship between television and its audience. Traditional television was built around time. Netflix was built around attention. The goal wasn't to make you watch at 8 p.m. on Thursday. The goal was to make you keep watching whenever you wanted. And Netflix designed its platform around that behavior. The countdown to the next episode, the autoplay feature, personalized recommendations, the continue watching section. Every element reduced friction between one piece of content and the next. You didn't have to search again. You didn't have to remember the channel. You didn't have to wait until next week. You simply kept watching. This changed the way stories were created too. Traditional television often needed to remind viewers what happened in previous episodes. A show had to survive a week between episodes. Netflix could tell stories differently. A viewer might watch 3 episodes in one night, so writers could create longer story arcs, more complex characters, and cliffhangers that immediately led into the next episode. The audience wasn't waiting 7 days. They were waiting 7 seconds, and that changed the power of a cliffhanger. But binge-watching wasn't only about convenience. It became part of the culture. People started discussing entire seasons online. Friends would ask, have you finished it yet? Spoilers became dangerous, and finishing a season became an event. Entertainment was no longer just something you watched. It became something you experienced together, even when everyone watched at different times. And Netflix's global reach made this even more powerful. A show could become popular in one country, then spread around the world. Millions of people could discover the same characters, the same story, the same moment, at almost the same time. This created global entertainment phenomena, but there was a downside. The more Netflix understood attention, the more valuable that attention became. Because Netflix wasn't only competing against other streaming platforms, it was competing against YouTube, social media, video games, TikTok, and every other thing fighting for your free time. That meant Netflix had to constantly answer one question: how do we keep people watching? And this question would shape the future of streaming. Because in the new entertainment economy, the most valuable resource wasn't DVDs. It wasn't television channels. It wasn't even movies. It was your attention. Netflix had helped create a world where entertainment was available everywhere, at any time. And now, every company wanted a piece of that world. Netflix had already transformed entertainment in the United States. But the company wasn't thinking only about America. It was thinking much bigger, the entire world. Netflix began expanding internationally in the early 2010s, and suddenly, its business model faced a completely different challenge. Different countries, different languages, different cultures, different tastes. A show that worked in America wouldn't necessarily work in Germany. A comedy popular in Britain might not connect with viewers in Japan. Netflix could have taken the traditional Hollywood approach. Create mostly American content, then export it around the world. But instead, Netflix increasingly invested in something much more powerful, local stories. The company realized that audiences didn't only want American entertainment, they wanted stories from their own countries, in their own languages, with characters and cultures they recognized. And Netflix could take those local stories and give them a global audience. This was a major change. Imagine a television show created in Spain, being watched by millions of people in the United States, or a Korean series, becoming a worldwide phenomenon, or a German crime drama, finding an audience thousands of miles away. Streaming made this possible. Traditional television was often limited by geography. A television network operated in a particular market. A local show might remain local. Netflix could distribute the same piece of content across dozens of countries, with subtitles and dubbing making it accessible. This created a new kind of entertainment business, global distribution, with local production. And Netflix began building a library that wasn't dependent on one country. This strategy became particularly powerful with international hits. Shows like Money Heist demonstrated how content created outside Hollywood could become globally popular. And later, Korean entertainment proved just how powerful this model could become. A show could originate in Seoul, but become a cultural phenomenon around the world. Netflix wasn't simply exporting American entertainment. It was creating a global marketplace for stories, and that changed the competition. Because Netflix's advantage wasn't just the number of subscribers, it was the size of its audience. The bigger the audience, the more attractive original content became. A production didn't necessarily need to succeed in one country. It could find viewers across dozens of markets. That gave Netflix more opportunities to turn expensive productions into global successes. But international expansion also created enormous costs. Netflix needed local productions, local teams, subtitles, dubbing, marketing, licensing, infrastructure, and constant investment in new content. The company was spending billions to keep its library attractive, and that created a new problem. Netflix had helped prove that streaming could replace traditional television. But now, everyone wanted to compete. Amazon entered streaming, Disney launched Disney+, HBO built its own platform, Apple entered the market, and traditional media companies began pulling their content away from Netflix. The entertainment industry was changing again. This time, Netflix wasn't the only disruptor. It was one of many, and the battle was becoming much bigger than Netflix versus television. It was becoming a fight for global attention. The question was no longer, can Netflix change entertainment? It already had. The question was, can Netflix remain the company that leads it? And to understand that, we need to look at how Netflix actually makes money, and why the streaming business is far more complicated than it looks. Netflix looks simple from the outside. You pay a monthly subscription, you open the app, and you watch movies and shows. But behind that simple experience is a complicated business. Because Netflix has to spend enormous amounts of money. Before it can earn money from its customers, it has to create shows, buy content rights, pay actors, hire production crews, build technology, operate servers, expand into new countries, and constantly convince subscribers that Netflix is worth paying for. So how does the company make money? The answer starts with something very simple: subscriptions. Millions of people pay Netflix every month. That recurring revenue gives the company something traditional movie businesses didn't have in the same way: predictability. A movie studio might spend hundreds of millions making a film, and then hope audiences show up. Netflix spreads its business across millions of subscribers. One customer may pay a relatively small amount each month, but millions of customers, paying repeatedly, create a massive revenue stream, and that changes how Netflix thinks about entertainment. Netflix doesn't necessarily need every show to become a blockbuster. A show can succeed by attracting a specific audience, keeping existing subscribers engaged, or convincing new customers to subscribe. That is very different from the traditional box office model. But Netflix has another advantage. Once the platform is built, adding another viewer doesn't require building another video store. There is no physical shelf, no DVD envelope, no rental clerk. The content is delivered digitally. That gives streaming enormous scalability, but there is still one massive expense: content. Netflix spends billions of dollars creating and acquiring movies and shows. And this creates a constant cycle. Netflix needs great content. Great content attracts viewers. Viewers attract subscribers. Subscribers generate revenue. and that revenue helps finance more content. It's a gigantic entertainment machine. But Netflix also learned that different customers value the service differently. Some want the cheapest option, some want higher video quality, some want multiple screens, and eventually, Netflix introduced an advertising-supported option in some markets. That created another potential revenue stream. Now Netflix could earn money from both subscribers and advertisers. This is important because streaming competition has become intense. Customers can choose Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime Video, HBO Max, Apple TV+, and many others, so Netflix can't simply say, "We have a lot of content." It has to constantly prove, "Why should you keep paying for us?" That is why Netflix's real product isn't actually a movie, it isn't even a television show. The real product is the experience. Open the app, find something quickly, press play, watch anywhere, discover something new, and come back tomorrow. Netflix wants to become a habit, because a subscriber who watches regularly is much less likely to cancel. And that brings us to the real lesson behind Netflix. The company didn't simply change how movies were delivered, it changed the economics of entertainment. It transformed entertainment from something people rented into something people subscribed to. It turned television from a schedule into a service. It turned content from a product into an ecosystem. And it taught an entire industry that the future of entertainment would not be controlled only by the studios. It would be controlled by whoever could capture the audience's attention. Netflix helped build that future. But its biggest legacy may not be the shows, it may not even be streaming. It's the expectation it created. We expect entertainment. Now, whenever we want, wherever we want, on whatever device we want. And that expectation may be Netflix's greatest impact of all, because Netflix didn't just change entertainment, it changed us. This is Business Decoded. Behind every billion-dollar brand is a story.